A $3 trillion market cap, $32.9 billion in cloud revenue. But could Microsoft's empire collapse because of one startup? Nearly half of Microsoft's future cloud empire depends on a single startup, one that is burning $12 billion every quarter. I'm Josh, and on today's episode of The Infographics Show, we'll reveal the massive Microsoft divorce that could bankrupt OpenAI and ChatGPT forever. Microsoft doesn't just invest in startups, it captures them. They hand founders up to $150,000 in free Azure cloud credits, not cash, digital vouchers. These small companies spend months building their products on Azure, mapping every database and workflow to Microsoft's proprietary formats. By the time the free credits run out, they're stuck. Tear out the backend and their apps crash, so they start paying real money. And now they're stuck in the architecture. They turn to corporate credit cards, pay-as-you-go tiers, and just like that, Microsoft turns free credits into real cash flowing straight into its books. But it's not just small startups that get caught up in Microsoft's digital web. Microsoft plowed $13.8 billion in direct funding into OpenAI, but almost none of that money actually left Microsoft's coffers. Instead, the company handed Sam Altman customized digital vouchers. OpenAI then used those vouchers to rent Microsoft servers. Every dollar spent legally counted as Azure revenue growth on Microsoft's books. OpenAI was backed into a corner. What does this mean for Microsoft's balance sheet? Corporate accountants have a secret weapon, a metric called the remaining performance obligation. It tracks guaranteed future revenue, and Microsoft is currently sitting at a staggering $625 billion. Wall Street treats that number as cash in the bank. Analysts feed it into discounted cash flow models, using it to justify Microsoft's share price, all the way to the end of the 2020s. 45% of Microsoft's guaranteed $625 billion is locked in, fueling OpenAI's machines. The future of its cloud empire hinges on one startup, and Wall Street expects it'll pay. Microsoft's balance sheet shows $40.3 billion in debt. Wall Street accepts that, but off the books there's something hidden, a $662 billion trap. Shadow leases and custom deals keep OpenAI's servers running, and Microsoft isn't alone. In the cloud world, physical hardware hides behind complex lease structures. And that is the problem. OpenAI doesn't have the cash to cover this hidden debt. Financial analysts at Deutsche Bank crunched the numbers. They projected OpenAI will burn through $143 billion before ever turning a real profit. A company setting billions of dollars on fire every 12 months just handed its largest investor the biggest profit spike in recent corporate history. OpenAI is an unemployed tenant facing eviction. Microsoft is the landlord holding the keys. Microsoft prints fake IOUs and hands them to OpenAI. Those IOUs pay for renting the servers. Microsoft legally reports that rent to Wall Street as cloud revenue growth. It is a flawless, infinite money loop until the servers actually turn on. Why can't OpenAI just build their own infrastructure? Well, the math doesn't add up. Sam Altman saw the problem. Azure's credits could never fuel the endless compute he needed, so he engineered an escape route called Project Stargate. He pitched a $500 billion master plan. He wanted independent data centers, 10 gigawatts of dedicated power. He flirted with sovereign wealth funds and foreign telecom giants. He planned to bypass the Azure ecosystem entirely, to sever the partnership. SoftBank and Oracle entered negotiations to provide alternative capital and infrastructure. Construction crews mobilized in Abilene, Texas. OpenAI prepared to build a 1.2 gigawatt facility, one site serving as the beachhead for a sprawling $665 billion infrastructure rollout through 2030. All they needed was the financing. The banks opened the disclosures, ran the numbers on the deficit, logged delays on permits, and tallied the engineer shortage to cool the massive racks. Wall Street refused the $500 billion gamble. Private investors wouldn't touch it. OpenAI quietly scrapped their master plan. They slashed the projected independent compute speed. They retreated to the existing infrastructure. They lack the capital to build their own fortresses and the margins to keep renting Microsoft servers. Azure's credit can't sustain the burn. Microsoft is left fueling a captive entity that cannot repay the principal. How does the physical hardware accelerate this crisis? Microsoft spreads its massive server costs over a 6-year accounting window. This keeps their quarterly spending low on paper, but AI doesn't wait. Frontier training models make top-tier GPUs obsolete in just 36 months. Every chip you buy today is tomorrow's legacy hardware. Imagine a delivery company buying a brand new fleet of trucks. They have to replace that entire fleet every 18 months because the old trucks suddenly cannot deliver packages fast enough. That's the economic reality of artificial intelligence hardware. Financial models from analysts expose $176 billion in hidden GPU depreciation actively decaying across the tech sector. Microsoft is booking record profits today by ignoring the physical decay of its own hardware. When the actual replacement cycle hits the balance sheet, the capital expenditure bill will explode. The models burn cash at a high velocity. OpenAI generates $12 billion in quarterly losses. Forbes estimates that the Sora video generation model alone consumes $15 million in hard cash every single day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The AI takeover isn't coming, it's already here, and we'll try to keep revealing the true story. Video generation isn't just text on steroids. Every single pixel must be calculated and rendered in sequence. It demands an exponential jump in raw computational power. Microsoft's capital expenditures surged 66% to $37.5 billion in a single quarter to feed this. The tech giant is purchasing land and pouring concrete to meet a theoretical demand that OpenAI literally can't afford to use. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, TSMC, operates as the physical brake on global artificial intelligence. They produce 90% of advanced silicon on Earth. Corporate demand outpaces their physical factory capacity by a factor of 3. You can't speed up the extreme ultraviolet lithography processes. You can't skip the chemical etching. Each chip must be born inside hyper-specialized clean rooms with perfect vacuums and extreme atmospheric control. Tech giants are sitting on billions in cash, unable to spend it, while their current servers lose value every single day. TSMC is racing to expand. They're planning a $52 to $56 billion expansion in 2026, but even that can't catch up. And it gets worse. A single gigawatt data center requires thousands of miles of thick copper wiring. Copper is running out. Mines in South America are struggling to meet demand. The cables, the power, the cooling, they all have to be perfect. One slip, one missing component, and the whole operation stalls. It's a billion-dollar waiting game. And that's not the only problem. Across the industry, data centers swallow 449 million gallons of water daily. Hyperscale facilities drain up to 5 million gallons of potable water every 24 hours just to stop the server racks from literally melting. Standard air cooling maxes out entirely at modern rack densities. The facilities need to pipe in cold water directly to the silicon chips to maintain operational temperatures. Local governments are starting to panic. Municipal water supplies are dropping while server farms keep expanding. In Florida, regulators stepped in with strict new rules to stop residents' utility bills from spiking. The legislation targets the massive energy and water demands of the new data center construction. The Midwest faces water stress. Local city councils are passing emergency moratoriums on new facility permits. They are choosing drinking water for their citizens over artificial intelligence infrastructure. The hyperscalers are being locked out of prime real estate because the local aquifer cannot support the thermal load. The hyperscalers are scrambling. They're abandoning traditional air cooling and moving to direct-to-chip liquid systems. That means ripping out entire air cooling units and bolting in metal cold plates straight onto the hottest silicon chips. Engineers need to thread miles of pressurized coolant pipes directly over racks holding billions of dollars of active hardware. The sheer material cost of this plumbing destroys the baseline construction budgets. If a single leak in a coolant line drips onto a motherboard, it destroys millions of dollars in silicon instantly. The capital required effectively doubles the initial build cost. Microsoft is footing this bill entirely up front. What happens when the hardware reaches its absolute limit? Generative AI only works as a business if the margins are massive. Those fat profits are supposed to pay for the mountains of steel, silicon, water, and electricity working away behind the curtain. OpenAI historically charged premium prices for application programming interface or API access. They utilized their monopoly position to drain enterprise budgets. The API market is turning into a commodity battlefield. OpenAI launched the GPT 5.2 frontier model and priced it at $1.75 per million input tokens. They guessed Fortune 500 companies would just absorb the cost to maintain access. They assumed the dominance would hold. They didn't expect what came next. Chinese competitors arrived. They didn't try to outspend OpenAI. They didn't build trillion-dollar server empires from scratch. They used model distillation. Instead of training artificial intelligence from scratch, they bought API access to OpenAI's best model. They asked millions of advanced math and coding questions. They captured the answers, and then they trained smaller, leaner architectures on those outputs, all without paying for the training costs. DeepSeek released their v3.2 architecture and matched the performance of the American Frontier models. They dropped their exact same token package to 28 cents. Overnight, the premium collapsed. A global price war erupted. Gross margins evaporated. Developers are actively routing their daily tasks to cheaper alternatives. They use OpenAI strictly for the most complex reasoning tasks. They funnel 90% of their standard workloads to foreign models or localized open-source alternatives. This strips away the high-margin volume OpenAI desperately needs to survive. How does Microsoft respond to this revenue collapse? Microsoft is watching on as this collapse unfolds. They know OpenAI can't generate enough revenue to pay off their hidden debt. The answer is to extract the value themselves. They integrated OpenAI's tech into their own products. Copilot becomes a core part of Word, Excel, and Teams. They charge a flat $30 a month per enterprise user. 15 million people already subscribe. Wall Street assumes every $30 is pure profit. Standard software is like a printing press. Build it once, distribute it forever, and profit margins soar toward 90%. Generative AI obliterates that model. Every time someone clicks the Copilot button, a supercomputer fires up and devours energy. That $30 flat monthly fee doesn't even cover the basic electrical cost. Microsoft eats the cost to keep the customer locked into the ecosystem. They're actively subsidizing the enterprise workflows of the largest corporations on Earth. Year-over-year cloud growth slowed to 39% in the second quarter of 2025. That's below the 40% growth Wall Street demands to justify the $3 trillion valuation. Profit margins are under pressure, sliding from a strong 46.7% to unsustainable levels. Microsoft is utilizing the most expensive computational infrastructure in human history to draft basic corporate emails. If they raise the price of Copilot, clients will turn to cheaper alternatives. If they keep the price at $30, the power users consume the server capacity. If they restrict the Azure capacity for Copilot, the software experience degrades instantly. Where does the breaking point occur? Standard venture capital can't touch this deficit. Silicon Valley doesn't have the liquidity to cover a hole this massive. They need a single entity capable of writing a $50 billion check in one afternoon. In January 2026, Sam Altman flew to the United Arab Emirates. He pitched an $830 billion corporate valuation to sovereign wealth funds in Abu Dhabi and requested $50 billion in hard cash. It was a Hail Mary to keep the existing Azure servers running and bypass the domestic banking system entirely. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States watches every move. The Pentagon classifies frontier AI as critical national security infrastructure. It's seen as a weapons system. Middle Eastern funds are blocked instantly. The government previously forced a Saudi fund to completely divest and exit an Altman-backed artificial intelligence chip startup. OpenAI is being starved of domestic liquidity and barred from accepting foreign sovereign bailouts. Every lifeline has been cut. The fallout in the bond market was swift. Microsoft officially carries $100 billion in debt. Investors recalculated the risk premium. Azure's growth slowed, and 45% of future revenue is locked into a single unprofitable tenant. They watched $12.7 billion vanish in shareholder payouts, while the data centers burned cash at record rates. Treasury yields climbed to 4.08%. Suddenly, cheap capital disappeared. Every new facility had to prove immediate profitability, something OpenAI couldn't guarantee. And just like that, expansion froze. The data halls began to implode. The sheer scale of the operational bleed has caused an internal panic. Compute access has been throttled to survive the cash crunch. ChatGPT responses lag for everyday users. The revenue curve has flatlined. They were cornered. So, in late February, OpenAI did the unthinkable. They betrayed Microsoft. In a desperate bid to keep the lights on, Sam Altman secured a $110 billion bailout led by Amazon, Nvidia, and SoftBank. But this isn't a victory for Microsoft, it's a hostage situation. To get Amazon's $50 billion, OpenAI had to agree to plow huge amounts of money into Amazon Web Services. They are cannibalizing Azure. The flawless infinite money loop is officially broken. Microsoft is left holding the bag on billions in decaying hardware, while their unemployed tenant packs up and moves across the street. Microsoft fed OpenAI billions in fake digital credits. OpenAI returned the favor by walking away, leaving Microsoft with billions in real physical liabilities. The accounting tricks were merely smoke and mirrors. OpenAI betraying Microsoft and pulling them down is just the first domino. Wall Street is looking at software, but the companies building the physical AI hardware are hiding a completely different, much deadlier financial secret. The cracks in that foundation are already tearing open right here. The divorce might not be finalized, but they are spending time apart. Now Microsoft is left thinking about what could have been. But OpenAI's troubles are far from over. Find out more about their cash flow problems in OpenAI is bleeding billions, ChatGPT is doomed, or click on this video instead.